You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 Gov.biz Radio, a CBS station.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS radio station Gov.biz, 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or on the web, WMCLive.com, where you can also find links to podcasts of all our previous shows. You can tweet us, hashtag WMC Live, or email Women's Media Center Live at gmail.com. This week, the week of Barack Obama's second inauguration as president, also observes Martin Luther King Day. Scholar, author, and activist Beverly Guy-Sheftall will help us look at how far we've all come, or have we, since he had a dream. We'll tackle the same question regarding the 40th anniversary of Roe versus Wade. By the way, a new study of post-Roe cases reveals the breadth with which feticide laws are used to arrest, detain, and force pregnant women into such interventions as C-sections against their will. You can find out more at www.rhrealitycheck.org. Two online activists, one of whom works with RH Reality Check, Robin Marty and Jessica Pieklo, join us about Roe's anniversary, as does the president of Planned Parenthood herself, Cecile Richards. But first, let's go behind the headlines. Last month, Mother Jones magazine ran a story by Dana Liebelson, a report on how newspapers seem not to care when notable women die. The piece boasted statistics, charts, and graphs, analyzing obit pages at such major and geographically diverse papers as New York Times, Boston Globe, the LA Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and the Denver Post. The lists of significant deaths in 2012 overwhelmingly feature men. Now, why do you think that is? It isn't that women aren't dying, after all. Bill McDonald, obit editor at the New York Times, is quoted in the piece as saying, "It's a rearview mirror. The people we write about largely shaped the world of the 1950s, 1960s, and increasingly the 70s, and those movers and shakers were, no surprise, predominantly white men." In other words, nothing wrong with their standards or process. It's our fault. We just hadn't earned their attention yet. Actually, it's the values that are skewed by the bias of those who created and enforced them. Women who mobilized for social progress, like Mothers Against Drunk Driving or for gun control, for example, are less likely to be noticed than are men whose success is measured in wealth or power, the Koch brothers or Rupert Murdoch. I remember reading some years ago that women's wishes for end-of-life care, do not resuscitate instructions or no extreme measures directives, were, even when carefully written out or in a living will, routinely ignored or dismissed by families, doctors, and hospital staff, all of whom took seriously such instructions from Dad about his end-of-life preferences. I remember thinking, oh great, we even have to liberate dying from sexism. Think how different obit pages would look if news outfits hired obit writers who'd had courses in remedial history, African American history, women's history, Native American, Asian American, Latina, lesbian, and gay. For that matter, we don't get real information about death and its causes and its scope from our obits. Domestic violence, for one. Did you know that if you add up all the women murdered by boyfriends or husbands since 9/11, it totals more deaths than all those Americans killed in 9/11, plus in both wars, Iraq and Afghanistan? Those aren't my statistics. Those are from the FBI. Such changes would make for a markedly different, inclusive, and revealingly newsworthy obituaries section. And each of us would finally have an obit of one's own. Now for our first guest. Dr. Beverly Guy-Sheftall is the founding director of the Women's Research and Resource Center at Spelman College, and she's the Anna Julia Cooper Professor of Women's Studies. She's also adjunct professor at Emory University's Institute for Women's Studies. In 1983, she became founding co-editor of SAGE, a scholarly journal of black women. A former president of the National Women's Studies Association, she's published numerous books, including the now classic Words of Fire, an anthology of African American feminist thought, and, co-authored with Janetta Cole, Gender Talk, the struggle for women's equality in African American communities. Welcome, Beverly, to Women's Media Center Live.
Very happy to be here. I think this is my first time.
It is your first time. Well, it's a fairly new show. We've only been in existence since August, but it will not be your last time. This is our Martin Luther King Day show, and I wanted to start by asking you, now that, the country is announcing, okay, well, we have a black president, so we're post-racial, and we're post-patriarchal, and we're post-sexist. The minute we gain half an inch, they immediately say, okay, you've arrived, now shut up. Where are we really in terms of, in particular, black women?
Actually, grew up in part in Montgomery, Alabama, at Alabama State University, and actually went to the church where Martin Luther King was a preacher.
Wow.
And actually
I never knew that.
Was an undergraduate student at Spelman and actually participated in sit-ins in downtown Richards with Martin Luther King. So I just wanted to remember my own personal connection with Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, whom I've been trying to do some serious work about her radical politics. So I wanted to just sort of, as a good feminist, begin with the personal before I went to the political. So I think I'll use Martin Luther King's language at the March on Washington about that blank check with respect to the continuing plight of African American women in the U.S. With respect to, number one, poverty, I would say. I would say that the numbers of African American women who remain poor are astounding, those numbers. I would also say that the health disparities that African American women continue to face are also astounding. I've been looking at some of those data within the last few days, hypertension, diabetes.
They're poverty-related.
And also, I would add to that violence.
Yeah.
Serious public health issue, violence against women globally, violence against women all over the world, and the issue of violence against women with respect to African American women is still depressing. So I would say that despite the fact that we have Obama in the White House, despite the fact that I think the women's movement has made tremendous progress since the 50s, the plight of women of color, Native American women, Latino women, poor white women, African American women in the U.S. Requires us to still continue to do a lot of work.
And doesn't it make you crazy when they say that economics is not a woman's issue?
Yes, it makes me really crazy.
Yeah.
When just because we have lots of wealthy women in the U.S., and I think people think about people like Oprah. That's just one that I'm thinking of, and somehow think that because there's Oprah Winfrey, that poor black women have somehow disappeared. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That'll be the day. Yeah. When you stepped down at as head of the National Women's Studies Association, I think what was that 2010?
Yes, Yes.
Yeah. You did a very interesting, you gave an interesting interview to The Root. And they were asking you about black feminism and how contentious and beleaguered it had been at the beginning, from all sides, from white women, from black men, from, you name it, and how it had progressed. And one of the things that you said back then, 2010, a couple of years ago, was that, by God, it had arrived now. Two generations of students had grown up being able to access black feminist studies, in which you have been a major figure, I might add. Where would you say, with an additional couple of years added on to that, where are we now in terms of black feminist studies?
I think black feminist studies in the academy is doing pretty well. I mean, I think it's very hard to take a women's studies course and not encounter black feminist studies. Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks, Patricia Hill Collins. We could just do the list in women's studies. I think if we looked at philosophy syllabi or political science syllabi, black feminist studies hadn't made its way there. Maybe even white feminist studies hasn't made its way into disciplines such as philosophy or in the sciences. Right. So I think black feminist studies is in the humanities, in the social sciences, within the academy. But I think that the politics of black feminism is still creeping its way through African American studies, and also maybe creeping its way through African American political intellectual history. I think the story, for example, of black women in the civil rights movement is still muted. I was very happy with the McGuire book, At the Dark End of the Street, where she repositions Rosa Parks as a progressive, even anti-rape activist.
Yes.
Before she sat down on that bus.
Yes.
But I think it's going to take a long time before that story about Rosa Parks makes it into the narrative about Rosa Parks. I've been working for the last couple of years, working to reposition Coretta Scott King as not just the wife of Martin Luther King and not just the sort of mother of the civil rights movement, but to illuminate her, what we would call radical race, gender, sexuality politics. So,
which is unknown. It's just totally been buried.
Totally been buried. And so I think that challenge remains. Even after scholars do the work, it doesn't necessarily make its way into public school textbooks or even into the narratives that we tell about ourselves.
Well, it's been about 20 years since Barbara Smith did, but some of us were brave.
That's right.
About women in the civil rights movement, and that's one of the books that I always mention at the end of a speech, and most people have still never heard of it. It's appalling.
That's right, and Stanley James, Francis Foss, and I did a sort of update of "But Some of Us Are Brave" a couple of years ago. That Feminist Press called "Still Brave," and it has barely made its way, I think, even into the higher ed women's studies curriculum.
No.
Yeah.
All right, a personal word or two. You are a very happy oneer. You are a happy single woman, and you've talked about how many heterosexual black women have a deep anxiety about being unpartnered, and you're a living role model for somebody who is happy, child-free, with an incredibly full life, filled with friends and joy. And so, how are we doing these days?
Well, let me just say, because I especially say this to my young, happily and voluntarily single and child-free.
Meant to say that.
In other words, I could be happily those things, but still not have chosen
that's
to
true.
be those things. So I'm very happy with the choices that I made in my personal life with respect to remaining single after a 10-year marriage and my former partner and I are still friends. I think it's important to say that. And I'm especially happy about having decided to remain single, because that means that I can devote more of my energies to a broader range of young folk.
Yeah.
So I don't have to just be consumed with motherhood or biological motherhood or grandmotherhood. And I think it's important to say that, because I think that sometimes when people hear that someone has chosen to not have children, immediately people say, well, that was just very, very selfish.
Yeah, right. I mean, which is crazy. And one of the worst words, I think, in the English language is selflessness. If you stop and think about it, who wants to have no self?
That's right.
You know. So, and when people ask me now my marriage status, I always say happily divorced. Mm-hmm. Which is the reflection of the truth. Mm-hmm. Oh, to my dismay, we have to go. But I want to thank you for being with us and the perspective that you always bring. And you promise that when you next come to New York, we'll have a real catch up, right?
I absolutely promise.
All right. I send you a big hug, Beverly.
Thank you so much, and I send you back another big hug.
Okay. You take care now. Time for a short break. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. We'll be right back with two young activists committed to keeping Roe v. Wade alive. So don't go away. After Hurricane Sandy, parts of the East Coast have returned to normal, but others won't see normal again for quite some time. One group getting volunteers and aid supplies to those who need it is called Occupy Sandy. Made up of a coalition of Occupy Wall Street activists, community organizers, and technologists, Occupy Sandy is using social media and other software tools to identify and quickly respond to urgent needs among the hardest-hit communities. You can help. To donate or to volunteer, visit occupysandy.org.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.
Welcome back. Our next guests are a duet of activism. Robin Marty is the senior political reporter for RH Reality Check. She tracks state restrictions on reproductive health care, and she writes for Ms. Magazine and Alternate, among other places. Jessica Mason Pieklo is a writer and adjunct law professor in the Twin Cities and the former assistant director of the Health Law Clinic at Hamlin Law School. She's also a causes blogger at care2.com, and these women have co-authored quite a book. And welcome to Women's Media Center Live, Jessica and Robin.
Hi, thanks for having us. Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I want to start right in talking about the forthcoming book because it sounds really exciting. You have co-authored your first book, I hope first of many, called Crow, C-R-O-W, Crow After Roe, How Women's Health is the New Separate but Equal and How to Change That. And it will be released in April 16th. By IG Publishing, but people can pre-order right now on Amazon and other online sources. Congratulations on the book. As an author, I always feel when new authors have joined the ranks of authors, it's a triumph for the intellect and good politics and other things. Talk about the book and what drove you to write the book.
Well, Jessica and I have actually worked together for quite some time trying to put together what we saw as the biggest challenges that will be facing women through the law when it comes to reproductive rights, and especially in the states, and how eventually these rights are going to be used, the cases are going to be used to try and challenge and overturn Roe in the Supreme Court. So Jessica came up with the idea, and we kind of developed it very quickly. Within a matter of a few months, we had a book into the publisher, and it looks at 12 different states and laws that are either on the books since 2010 or have been on the books but haven't been enforced until the last couple of years, and how each of these laws is meant to either directly provoke a Supreme Court challenge, or if not, it will leave women with less access to health care, less access to abortion, less access to birth control than they would have originally, especially if they're women of color, women who are in rural areas, or women who are of lesser means.
This is Jessica, and one of the things that was important as we were setting up the book is we thought that the 40th anniversary of Roe really gave us an opportunity to look back and assess what is the state of reproductive choice in this country. And I think there is always this ongoing conversation within the movement as to whether or not Roe is viable and good law, or really what's the lay of the land. And so Crow After Roe takes the challenges that are occurring at the state level in states where there are not really strong reproductive rights networks who have the ability to push back against this, and makes the argument that, well, the best case scenario that we can come up with at this point in time is that reproductive access isn't going to get much worse than it is. The worst case is that it's going to be gone altogether. And so we create kind of a floor to ceiling. And as we were putting together the list of challenges and the types of laws that were really going to spur this, it became quite obvious that the laws and the places in which we were seeing these were designed to target the most vulnerable women. So these are women of color, these are women in rural areas, and that is very distinct. So that helps frame the conversation of a basically two-tier healthcare system where some women will have access at a greater degree than others, and that's really, unfortunately, been the case since almost the beginning of Roe, but that we've seen that really amplified, particularly after the 2010 midterm elections and going into even what I believe will be the 2014 midterms.
Tell me something. Is it true, I believe, that something approaching 85% of all counties in this country lack a provider now?
Actually, Guttmacher just put out a new recent report, and I think that number has actually been updated to 87 now. So we're losing even more as we go. And a lot of these are clinics that are being lost primarily because either doctors they're getting new rules for doctors to have to be board-certified OBGYNs, to have all these admitting privileges.
Right.
Like we've seen in Mississippi, for example.
Exactly.
Right. And so we right now have states where there are 5 states right now that only have one provider in the entire state. But we also have these very low-access states. Tennessee is one that I'm thinking of right offhand, where there are multiple providers, but they're all within very small urban areas. So for the most part, most of the state is completely without access.
Yeah, and because the requirements are, in many cases, that she appears, but then she has to go home and think about it, and then she has to come back and be tested, and then she has to go back home. If she's at the other end of the state, and she's a poor woman, and it's a 3-day trip and requires staying in a motel, it is virtually impossible. I mean, it makes it inaccessible in a flat-out way.
And it's getting more and more difficult. We've watched Utah pass the first 72-hour waiting period last year, and now South Dakota had been blocking theirs for quite some time. They've just announced that they're going to be letting the 72-hour waiting period of the law go through and stop challenging that while they concentrate on the part of the bill that says that a woman has to go visit a religiously based crisis pregnancy center first, basically to get permission to say that it's okay for her to go ahead and have an abortion.
It makes you crazy. Okay, one of you is a reporter, the other one of you is a constitutional lawyer. It's a hell of a good combination. I'm awfully glad we're on the same side. And since you're expanding your focus to include women's health in general, how do we do this? In other words, 90% of the most used health care plans, as I understand it, are gender rated, which means, in effect, that a female non-smoker might pay higher premiums than a male smoker. So how do we remedy this kind of discrimination? Would this include the necessity for the ERA to finally make it out into passage, or are there other ways of dealing with this in terms of the new Affordable Health Care Act? And how does that link up with reproductive rights?
Sure. Well, I think the Affordable Care Act takes care of a little bit of this. In terms of some of the problems with gender rating. I think in terms of the fight for reproductive rights and access, though, the first thing we need to look at is the Hyde Amendment in terms of what we do here. And the Hyde Amendment is a law that bans the use of federal dollars to go towards reproductive health services, abortion in particular, at the state level. And so what that has meant is that for any woman who needs abortion care and receives Medicaid funds, those funds, unless her state, like Minnesota, for example, specifically provides for that, she does not have the access or the ability to pay for that. So access in that sense is meaningless if you can't pay for it.
Exactly.
So I think in terms of our first priority, we should look at repealing the Hyde Amendment, because
wouldn't that be great?
Does, frankly, the most damage to the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then beyond there, I think we can start talking about things like the ERA as another alternative. But in terms of regulation of the insurance industry itself hasn't necessarily been reluctant to cover these procedures. They've just been heavily regulated by the anti-choice legislators in their state and at the federal level. So I think that getting those regulations off the books, which is much less complicated than passing a constitutional amendment, for example, is a good place to start. But first and foremost, in my opinion, we need to get rid of the Hyde Amendment.
Mm-hmm. And this is Robin. This is actually something that I've been thinking about lately, is the fact that, yes, we've basically done away with gender rating when it comes to insurance in the Affordable Care Act. But locally, a lot of the state legislatures are now going for and putting in abortion riders on insurance plans.
Yeah.
So in essence, if you are going to be a woman and possibly of childbearing age, you are going to have to get a separate rider that you would pay for on its own in order to ensure that if something happens, that you have access to abortion through your insurance plan.
Yeah.
So really all that's doing is just putting right back into place the same gender disparity that was already in the plans that the Affordable Care Act got rid of.
Exactly, yeah. I wish that we had more time. Our time is just about up. And again, congratulations on the book, Crow After Roe, How Women's Health is the New Separate but Equal and How to Change That. Order it now.
Great. Thank you so much for having us, Robin.
And now it's time for Verbal Karate. Today's kicks and chops are based on the language section of the Women's Media Center Guide to Media Covering Reproductive Issues, written by Sarah Erdrich, edited by Rachel Laris. On previous programs, we've discussed the terminology of, quote, emergency abortion instead of the loaded partial birth abortion phrase, and we've urged avoiding the phrase pro-life when describing anti-choice positions. But there's more, especially with polling, where it's a matter of how questions are phrased. For instance, in May 2012, Gallup reported that America was now a pro-life nation, with 50% of those polled describing themselves as pro-life and a record low 41% describing themselves as pro-choice. Yet the same poll showed that 77% of Americans believe abortion should be legal under all, that's 25%, or some, 52%, circumstances. The conclusions? Well, for one thing, public opinion on the legalization of abortion actually has not changed much since Roe. For another, people care a lot about why women have abortions, and some reasons seem more acceptable to the public than others. Things have changed, though, regarding the labels pro-life and pro-choice. First coined by activists, we now know that they don't capture the complexities of people's attitudes. Interestingly, a recent survey by the Public Religion Research Institute found a large majority of Black and Hispanic Americans identify as both pro-life and pro-choice when it comes to abortion. Much of the media has now stopped using these labels, and many advocates now use terms like pro-reproductive rights and pro-reproductive justice, since those phrases equate access to abortion and birth control as a civil rights issue for women, which it is. Today, the most common language used by non-opinion media for groups opposing legal access to abortion is simply anti-abortion. But we should all be aware that the most active organizations for overturning Roe are also against wider access to birth control. They oppose access to emergency contraception and to efforts to make health insurance providers cover contraceptive costs. For most of these people, the reason is religious in nature. So our terminology should clarify if an advocate or organization, in addition to opposing legal abortion, also opposes access to birth control. You can download your own free copy of the complete Women's Media Center Guide to Media Covering Reproductive Issues from the website womensmediacenter.com. It has lots of other good stuff too, statistics, arguing points, useful facts, and it will be available toward the end of January. Excuse me. And it's break time again. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. Next, the woman who leads Planned Parenthood in providing women's health care and in ensuring reproductive rights, Cecile Richards, when we return in just a minute. "40 years ago this January, the Supreme Court decision Roe v. Wade guaranteed women's right to choose abortion. In 1977, Congress ended this right for the most vulnerable women when it passed the Hyde Amendment, banning Medicaid coverage of abortion. The National Network of Abortion Funds works to restore coverage while helping women pay for the procedures they need. You can help too. To learn more or donate so no woman is forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy to term, go to fundabortionnow.org.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.
Welcome back. Cecile Richards is a national and international leader in women's health and reproductive rights. President of Planned Parenthood Federation of America and the Planned Parenthood Action Fund, she directs more than 750 affiliate health centers nationwide, providing care to almost 3 million patients and sex education to more than 1 million people. The website, PlannedParenthood.org, in both Spanish and English, gets 43 million visits a year from people seeking health care services. Welcome, Cecile. It's very good to have you here on Women's Media Center Live.
Thanks for having me, Robin.
It's wonderful. Well, let's start in with the amazing year in 2011 when you led an absolutely historic nationwide campaign to preserve access to Planned Parenthood preventive care. It seemed that they were coming in. You closed the doors and they came in through the windows and down the fire. How did you do that and emerge, in fact, with the number of Planned Parenthood supporters doubling, reaching more than 7 million? That's some leadership.
Well, I think actually what it demonstrates is just the enormous goodwill there is for Planned Parenthood around the country. And that really stems from the fact that 1 in 5 women in this country have been to Planned Parenthood at some point for health care. Mm-hmm. And that loyalty lasts a lifetime. So I think the most exciting thing, though, if there was something about having to go through this last 2 years of assaults on women's health, is that, of the 1.5 million new supporters we gained, half of them were young people. And
wow.
They were young women and young men who'd never been involved in the fight for reproductive rights, and they are fantastic, energetic, and they come to these issues with a whole new generational perspective.
Maybe they didn't understand the role of Planned Parenthood in advocacy for healthcare, just healthcare itself.
Right. Well, it's interesting because we have a lot of campus chapters. We doubled our campus chapters around the country. Of course, my kids are in college as well, so I hear from them. There are so many young people who just count on Planned Parenthood. That's where they go for their first probably adult doctor visit, if you will, the first mm-hmm. place they went to get birth control or to get STD testing. And so it's interesting when the Congress went after us and said we're going to get rid of Planned Parenthood, for these young people, that was a direct assault on their healthcare provider, and it made them into activists.
The role that you've had, both you individually and you plural, Planned Parenthood, in shaping the healthcare coverage debate has been very large and really important. Where do you think it's now secure for the moment. It's secure. I'm in a paranoid crouch these days, a defensive paranoid crouch, but it seems secure for the moment, certainly with Obama's reelection. But where are we going from here? Many of us thought, that was the foot in the door, and that we wanted it expanded. We wanted single payer. We wanted all the things that we had wanted at the beginning. Is there any hope for that, do you think?
Well, I think that there are a couple of really important issues that are going to be up in front and center. I mean, they already are this year. And I would say, too, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't really out to get you. Because I do think that we are seeing in these new state legislatures that are just now beginning to convene, and even in the new Congress, the same repetitive attacks on women's health care access, everything from safe and legal abortion to birth control to Planned Parenthood. So I don't think that those battles have gone away. I do think under the Affordable Care Act, probably the most important progress that was made is the right of all women under their insurance plans, under the new insurance plans, to get birth control coverage for no copay. Now, this is a huge step forward. I mean, it's an economic benefit for women. It's a huge healthcare access benefit for women. But we know that the attacks against birth control access are continuing. There's I think something like 40 some odd lawsuits out there by employers trying to keep women from getting birth control. And so this is something that we are keenly focused on at Planned Parenthood, because it's such an important benefit and something that every woman in the 21st century should be able to get.
Yeah, it's crucial. You have stopped, Planned Parenthood has stopped using the phrases pro-choice and pro-life. Always drove me crazy, because we're pro-life. Who isn't pro? They were always anti-choice, pro-choice and anti-choice. But right. I know that a lot of advocacy groups have stopped using those phrases because when used in polls, when we all know polls depend on how the question is asked, it seems to confuse people a lot. For example, the majority of the Hispanic and African American communities will put themselves down as being both pro-choice and pro-life, and people don't seem to. They will say that they are pro-life, but then they will also talk about it's a woman's decision. So we're looking for clarification of language, and I know Planned Parenthood did an in-depth study on that. What have you come up with?
Well, I think what we've seen is that the conversation over the last several decades has shifted, and that these political labels that try to put black and white language on what is a very complex topic simply don't work. And you're exactly right, Robin. What we've seen is that many people who might call themselves in political terms pro-life, in fact, are strongly supportive of Roe and very deeply believe that women should be able to make decisions about their own pregnancies. And in fact, what we hear consistently across the country is that women and men saying, you just can't ever be in another woman's situation or walk in another woman's shoes. And so we think it's really important to reassert what is a fundamental belief of what Roe is about and what we believe as healthcare providers, and that is women need to be able to decide without governmental interference, and certainly without politicians' advice or legislation about what to do about their pregnancies. And that is everything from deciding to have a child, deciding to terminate a pregnancy, or deciding to give a child up for adoptions. These are the kinds of decisions women have been making for decades in this country and have to be able to make without governmental interference. Yeah.
The language fascinates me because, of course, I'm a writer, and the Women's Media Center is shortly going to be coming out with the Women's Media Center Guide to Media Covering Reproductive Issues, to help the media cover these issues fairly. And one of the things that the guide points out is that even the term anti-abortion, which is clear, doesn't necessarily be careful, because many of the groups that are anti-abortion are more than anti-abortion. They are also anti-contraception or anti-access to contraception, and we don't have a term even yet really for that. They're except anti-women's right to control her own body.
Correct. I think you're hitting on an incredibly important point, Robin, which is, first, when you consistently across this country, and this has been for, you can look back decades, the vast majority of people in this country believe they support Roe, and they believe that women should be able to make their own decisions about their pregnancy.
Right.
And when you get to this very narrow group of people who want to overturn Roe, who believe we should criminalize women's decision-making, they're exactly the same people that are trying to end access to birth control and other reproductive health care. So you're right that this is, I actually think that, unfortunately, the political nomenclature has actually masked the overwhelming and consistent support among all generations for women having legal rights in this country. And that's what I think, as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of Roe, I think we have to understand that there have been two generations of women who've come of age during a time when abortion was accepted as legal and as part of women's rights in this country.
Right. It's hard sometimes for younger women to fully grasp that there were back alley abortions. I mean, intellectually they can, but I lived through them. When the women's movements first started doing referrals, and I remember when we talked about abortion repeal, and then there was other groups that talked about abortion reform. So this is still very fresh in my memory and women of my generation. But for younger women, you're absolutely right. They've grown up with it as a right, a human entitlement. What about Roe? Is Roe? Again, in my paranoid Crouch moment, I worry that Roe is endangered because of the court.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct that we have so many challenges to Roe that are working their way through the judicial system. And we've had, as you know, too, an unprecedented number of bad bills passed by politicians in states that fundamentally undercut the right of women to make these decisions themselves. I think in the next couple of years we'll see one of these before this court. Of course, the re-election of President Obama was so important to protect at least the belief by the Supreme Court that precedence is a value, and I do think that we're going to probably see, one or two more Supreme Court nominations during his term, and so it is, and particularly at a time when I think this country is so racked by partisan political divides, and certainly the Tea Party has contributed to that. It's crucial that we have a federal judiciary that can rise above politics and protect the rights of the majority of citizens in this country to make their own medical decisions. So the federal court fights are going to be really, and appointments are going to be really important. Very important.
I just so long for the day when this is not a political football, when it doesn't go back and forth, when the other side comes into power and then suddenly women's reproductive rights, basic human right, is endangered again. And when it is, many of us thought that happened with Roe, but no, because they're popping up like those dolls that you slap down, and they keep, they're weighted and they come popping back up again.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of whack-a-mole, and I mean, what we're looking at now at these state legislatures that you would have thought saw something happen in November, which we all witnessed, which is where we had the biggest gender gap ever in history in a presidential election, where women's issues and women's rights issues were very much in the forefront, and yet there are a lot of politicians who did not get the message or who can't seem to get off of these attacks on women.
Yeah. We're going to take a short break here and then continue with more of your wisdom and your good ideas. So hang in there.
Okay, thanks, Robin.
I'm Robin Morgan here with Women's Media Center Live, and we'll be right back with more insights by and into Cecile Richards of Planned Parenthood.
If you ever need an organ transplant, you will probably die before you get one. Thousands of Americans die waiting every year. You can improve your odds by joining LifeSharers, and it's free. Visit lifesharers.org or call 888-ORGAN-88. LifeSharers puts organ donors first. When you join LifeSharers, you get preferred access to the organs of other members. This could literally save your life. Join LifeSharers today. There's no age limit. Parents can enroll their minor children, and no one is excluded due to any pre-existing medical condition. Call 888-ORGAN-88 or visit lifesharers.org. That's LifeSharers.org. LifeSharers. It's free. It could save your life.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 Gov.biz Radio, a CBS station.
And we're back again, continuing our conversation with Cecile Richards. I want to take a minute and talk about the personal Cecile Richards, who is terrific. I think I first got to really work with you when you were at Texas Freedom Network and combating the extreme religious right and working for separation of church and state. And I was putting together Fighting Words, the little toolkit book for combating the religious right. But you of course, for the rare listener who happens to have been on Mars, you are part of a feminist dynasty. You are the daughter, the daughter of the great Governor Ann Richards of Texas. There's a new play about Ann coming out, isn't there?
That's correct, and it's so exciting. I feel like Mom is having a little bit of a boomlet, if you will, this year. There have been some Ann Richards books and film, and now Holland Taylor, this fabulous actress, who spent really the last 5 years of her life studying Ann Richards and writing about her, watching everything she ever said, did, wrote, has come out with a play. It's called Ann, so it's easy to remember, and it's opening at Lincoln Center in March. And I can't wait to go. I saw an earlier version last year at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., which was so terrific, and it was really fun because a couple of women who were there in the audience with me were also really good friends of Mom. One was Mary Landrieu, the senator from Louisiana.
Yes.
Who really Mom was a mentor for her. Janet Napolitano, who again, served, of course, as governor in Arizona, now in the cabinet. And it was really kind of a wonderful homecoming. I know Secretary of State Clinton was also able to attend, and it's a great production. And listen, nothing would please my mother more than to think that she's opening on Broadway.
I was just going to say she made it to Broadway.
Well, there was a great headline in the Dallas Morning News actually that said Ann Richards goes to Broadway, and I was thinking, I'm just sorry, Mom, isn't around to see that, because she would love it. She would
adore it. Well, back to you. Your Twitter feed starts with two wonderful identifiers, excuse me, that one would not normally expect. It says runner, baker, and then it goes on to list your other historic political achievements. Tell me about the runner, and what do you bake?
Well, I love to run. It's the one kind of time I can get out of my head a little bit and just kind of listen to my internal person. And I'm very fortunate. I live near Central Park. And boy, there's no place better to experience the seasons than to get to run through Central Park. So I love that. And baking, well, I come from Texas, so the two things we really specialize in Texas are deep frying, which is a lost art in my opinion. I've taught all my kids how to fry, because you got to know that. And then baking. And I love pie. I think pie is the most perfect food group ever identified. So me and my kids love to bake pies. And in fact, Thanksgiving, it's almost a 1-for-1 pie for person ratio around the Thanksgiving table.
Oh my God. I'm very impressed. I bake bread. something died.
Well, that's good too. That's a fan. I love to bake bread. I just seldom have the time.
Well, yeah, bread is amazing because also you have to punch it and knead it, and you know if some dumb politician has really pissed the hell out of you, you can pretend as you're kneading the bread. It's it's a good way to get it out. Last question. And I've asked this of women all over the world, always with amazing answers. You've had, even though you're a young woman still, you've had an amazing career of public service and grassroots organizing and assistant deputy to Nancy Pelosi. I mean, you've been all over the map and always consistently for women and for good causes. So if you had to say what was the greatest cause of sadness or regret in your life, what would it be? And what would be the cause of your greatest pride?
Oh, my goodness, Robin. Well, I in my own life, I guess the closest relationship I ever had was with my mother, and probably nothing will ever even parallel that. And I wish Mom had lived to see the day that we elected Barack Obama president, and that she would live to see the day for us to elect a woman president, which I do believe we'll do in my lifetime. She spent her entire life fighting for social justice and equity and equality, and that would have been so important. And I guess I sort of believe she does know somewhere up there, and that probably she had something to do with it. In terms of the greatest joy, well, again, I guess I'm just sort of a family person. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are in college now. My daughter Lily has actually become the press secretary for Tim Kaine and worked hard for his election. The greatest joy for me is seeing not only as my own children, and then, of course, these thousands of young people that have gotten involved with Planned Parenthood become activists. And because I think for all of us, we know that we have our short moment here to make an impact in this world, and the most important thing we could ever leave behind is a whole new generation of young activists that are going to fight to make the world an even better place for women, for all disenfranchised people, and so that's probably what gives me the greatest joy.
Wow, your mom would be so proud of you. I mean, she was when she was alive, and if she could see you, and as you say, if anybody can find a way to see you now, she can find it. Probably.
Yeah, she's on my shoulder every day, and it is. And I will say, and it's funny. I of course run around the country a lot, speaking at Planned Parenthood events and doing various things. And I can't tell you the number of women I run into in a hotel or in a restaurant or even in a airport restroom who says, God, I met your mom and she told me this and it changed my life. And so her impact, I believe, lives on with many women around the country.
And it's so beautiful that your daughter is also now involved in politics. It is a feminist dynasty, I mean, this is going on.
That's all we can do, right? It's just it's hope that those that come after us can get it a little bit better than we did.
I love it, and I love what you're doing, and you've been amazing for Planned Parenthood and for women's self-determination and women's bodily integrity and men's and the health of the country. And on behalf of so many of us, Cecile, thank you for everything that you've done, for the hellish couple of years you went through, and not that it's easier now, but they were really the pits, and the graceful and courageous way you carried yourself and the organization and all of us.
Well, I want to say back at you, Robin. I have to really shout out the Women's Media Center and the work that they do and that you do every day to make sure that women's voices are heard in the media. It's so critical, it's so important, and so anything I can ever do to be supportive. It's wonderful to have women's voices louder and more constant on all of these issues.
Well, thank you, and thank you for being with us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have your voice here. And now it's time for Fighting Words. I've been known to froth at the mouth when well-meaning people, eager to pass any tiny gun control measure they think might squeak through, reassure so-called sportsmen or collectors or it's just our culture gun defenders that, after all, nobody is suggesting that we take away all guns. I yell, stomping around my living room, I am suggesting just that. No exceptions for a culture that celebrates manhood as murderous. No maiming and killing animals for sport. No collecting lethal weapons. No guns. So one way I calm down and get perspective is by visiting the Hubble or NASA websites. But poor beleaguered NASA, its funding always sparse and more begrudged now. Private enterprise taking over the shuttle, and our space program all but vanished into a black hole. And yet, last August, speaking of black holes, NASA's Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, or WISE mission, uncovered millions of supermassive black holes across our universe, plus about 1,000 of the brightest galaxies ever found, nicknamed hot dogs, hot, dust-obscured galaxies, DOGs. Then, in November, NASA yoked the power of the Hubble and Spitzer space telescopes together with massive galaxy clusters, natural zoom lenses, which the scientists then drafted into use to magnify distant galaxies. This is awesome in the real sense of the word. The result, we frail temporary beings found the most distant galaxy ever seen in the universe, peeking back into a time when the universe was 3% of its present age, 13.7 billion years. Last, just this month, NASA's Kepler Space Telescope, which had already enabled scientists to identify more than 2,300 planet candidates, began this new year announcing the discovery of 461 newer planet candidates, 4 of them less than twice the size of Earth and orbiting their sun's habitable zone. Now, did any of these wonders make headlines? Nah. News? Barely. Our media, and many of their consumers, are busy pleading with unevolved life forms that if they'll just please put down their assault rifles, they can cherish the rest of their arsenal all they like. Surely there has to be the potential for intelligent life on some of those newly found planets, because at times it's truly difficult to locate it on this one. And that's our program for today. You've been listening to us on CBS station 1580 gov.biz AM radio in Washington, D.C., and on the web at WMClive.com, which also has podcasts of previous shows. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams Chancellor, Technical Director Michelle Kinsey Bruns, Production Assistant Nora Eakin, Jimmy Henderson on board, and our founding sponsor Regina Kulik Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us. Join us next week when we look at how immigration policy really affects women and hear from women in the Syrian diaspora, plus a surprised guest you will not want to miss, here on Women's Media Center Live.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.